I'm finally doing this again. Such is life, that some things just kind of fall by the wayside, and months pass, and anyways, I'm back. I hope you're happy to see me as much as I am kind of glad that I'm actually doing a thing, that I'm doing this. So, anyhow, I thought I'd come back with another overdue book review. Another wonderful little friendly reminder to go and support your public libraries, just showing up, checking out books. I think foot traffic alone helps them get funding for all the wonderful public services that public libraries provide to schools, the youth, to folks looking for jobs, to folks with less resources, and honestly, for a lot of creative types and people that can use their studios. And I think they have like 3D printers in the ones in some of my area as well. So just, renting out some books. There's no late fees, at least at my public library branches. Ever since the pandemic, or for whatever reason, they've done that. So, uh, may as well check out some books and get some reading done, or honestly, video games, music. That's I'm done with this PSA. You guys get it. Anyways, so the book I wanted to talk about today is this: David Bowie Made Me Gay, 100 Years of LGBT Music by Darryl W. Bullock. And I saw this put on one of the side shelves, kind of, prominently displayed. Obviously, Rainbow Lightning Bolt caught my eye, and I'm like, oh, that's cute. And I saw the the title, it gave me a chuckle. And but then I actually, the subtitle was what actually made me want to check this out, was 100 years of this sort of music from LGBT folk. I do want to say a disclaimer though. The other thing that kind of made me interested to read it is, why was it listed as LGBT and not LGBTQIA plus, or as queer, or all the other wonderful little acronyms and such I have seen. So anyways, that's kind of what got me interested to be like, what's going on here? So I also was curious to know a little more about our history, the influences that have existed throughout the last century, and how that has shaped music culture and sort of queer culture, as much as I fancy myself a queer theorist. One thing about at the start of this book, he says that there's few pieces of media that document the influence of gay, lesbian, bi, trans musicians. So he really does mean LGBT. So I took some haphazard notes on this little library flyer about the sort of things that are available at my public library, of like 3D printing and audio projects and printers and video recording rooms and all this cool stuff. But yeah, I just was like, I don't want to get too in the muck of like documenting this, because I have, with previous books, I actually go to write down my notes in this book that I keep on me. But I was like, I don't want to get too into the weeds on this one. But as you can see, I kind of I went all over. I'm like scratching mess of notes on all these little bits, and I might, rewrite the little things that I think are interesting that I want to remember in my other book or somewhere else, because I think that there are some notes here I would like to continue to refer back to, and there's also just a lot of stuff that I'm like, eh. So, anyways, let's see, where are we at? So, starting off in this book, anyways, I kind of like got the vibe like, okay, yes, this is written by what I looked at the author, because I'm like, okay, like whose experience and whose perspective are we writing from? Because I think it's important that, for example, there's a lot of people that talk about representation matters, and like having an actor, for example, who is non-binary play a non-binary character is like more technically correct in its own way than having a cis person do so. Um, but so I was interested, like, about, where's the perspective of this author about part of the way through, because I got the vibe that, yeah, like clearly he's you know, not against the LGBT plus community, but I also was like, the way that things were being written kind of in its own way, like reinforced the status quo, talked about like sex life or drama or things like that in a certain way. I don't feel like this book was written with like any regard to like ace representation, which like for me, I was like, ooh, you're just talking about that. My little dummy mind's like, ew, it's a little much, but you know, that's cool. It happens. I get it. And so looking into it, this author appears to be. I looked him up on the Google because I'm like, okay, what's this guy about, really? You know, and he looks like he is from England and of their sort of liberal side because I saw some tweet or whatever where he's like, the Tories are at it again or whatever. And I'm pretty sure those are like the Republicans over there. So, anyways, I get the vibe that like, yeah, he's kind of that kind of guy, but I do definitely feel that it is written with like a certain level of, and I guess I don't know if this is like a British thing too, but there is just definitely a certain level of like, he says LGBT and he starts and stops with that, and I just don't know, like, also I will say, like, as a like warning for anybody curious about this book, the the way that he treats talking about trans artists, I think he does in a way that is a little haphazard and a, I won't say like transphobic or necessarily disrespectful. I think he definitely credits and is like, yes, this person is influential, that's cool. But I think he kind of muddles like pronouns and like birth name, dead names a little bit. I'm not a big fan. I literally like the section where he was talking about Wendy Carlos. I didn't know who he's talking about because I dead ass forgot like her dead name. Like that's where I'm at. Totally look her up. She is a icon in the synth and electronic music development, and I thought that was a very cool chapter. He also talked about the inspirations from, let me look it up, Pierre Henry's work and how the psych rock was kind of influential to Futurama's theme, or also, um, oh my gosh, who was it? The composer for like fucking Star Wars is a trans woman, I believe. So like that was really cool. I thought that was really cool to read about that. I just felt like he was really haphazard about the way that he was handling names. In this case, he did some times where, yeah, he would just, where Darryl would just, you know, use the last name, which works in some cases, and in some cases it's a little confusing. Or like there's another artist where he literally has a sentence where it's like, he lived the rest of his life as a woman or something, and it's like, hang on. You realize like what you just said, right? Like, why did you write it in this way? And I definitely think there's an aspect and an element to say like there's an academic way to kind of be like, this is the name they were born under, or they were producing some music under this name. I wonder like just what is the correct sort of tactfulness to go about that. And different trans people and different people who have changed their names in any respect have felt differently about their names. My favorite example is Susie Eddie Izzard, who is like, really, like, I've always wanted the name Susie, but it's okay, you can use either so my fans can't mess up. I think that's really charming. And like I go by like 5 different names and I'm like, I'm totally okay with it, and I think that that's really cool. But it's like, okay, like how are we respecting this, and how are we, you know, it just seems so, he seems so willy-nilly, it seems so just haphazard. And I'm just over here like, Darryl, the T in LGBT is for trans people, like, please. So anyways, that's like how I feel about that. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about like people's sex lives, which is like, it's one of those kind of double-edged swords of like, it is important to acknowledge that, and you know, that is part of somebody's identity, like as an artist, I'm sure. And some people are more open about it than others, and that's talked about a lot of the book. Like some of these people have been very like closeted, or like never came out because they didn't want their record to get ruined, or they did come out and like they found so much more success because they're like, oh my god, finally I can write art that is important to me and speaks to my experience. And I think that that is really interesting to look at that sort of interplay. But I do feel like there's almost like a lack of there's a lack of nuance in the book, I guess, for queerness. Like he seems to kind of talk in like binaries, or this was this and that was that, or oh, you know, David Bowie said he was gay, but then he said he was bisexual, and like it's like I don't know, man, like shit's fluid. Like I don't know, like I feel like it could be done in a different way. And there's other artists like Langston Hughes actually is mentioned as like, ooh, a closeted gay man in this book. But I'm telling you, like, keep Google close, because I looked it up and it was like, you know, maybe the guy was ace. And like, you don't know. And like, it's really up to the individual, whether they're an artist or public figure or not, about like how much they have that is like public information. I think that's just like something to consider. With that, the whole disclaimer out of the way, I will say it was really cool to read about all the history. I learned about a lot of people that I never even knew about, like Tony Jackson, who was really big in the jazz era. He would sing the femme and masque sides of a duet and be like the best piano player you ever seen in your life. And the way that censorship has affected people throughout the century, and the different sort of social tides, even of like the pansy craze, and how like drag balls came about, and some of our earliest drag queens like Julian Entledge. And there's like really cool pictures in this too. Like I will say, it seems like a lot of them are from the author's personal collection, which I'm kind of like, all right, you know, that feels like it maybe deserves a little bit of, I don't know, just looking at it a little closely, just considering that. But like, this was really cool. This is Gladys Bentley back in like the 1930s. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Love that. And yeah, there's a lot of just really cool stuff. But as for the title, I think it's an interesting. I don't think I agree. I don't think I agree with this title, because there is literally actually a quote from Andy Bell that says David Bowie did not make me gay, and there is also a quote way later that basically another artist said, my mom made me gay by listening to Karma Chameleon like 100 times a day, or something like that, which is funny. So honestly, it's like, you could almost rename this like Boy George made me gay, or something else. And frankly, the subtitle was what caught my attention. So I would be interested if there's a different way to kind of play with that. And I don't want to disregard or like, you know, crap on this guy's sort of sense of playfulness. But I will say, like, I feel like David Bowie's influences were talked about a lot in the first chapter, but also it was really more about that he just had died. And this book was written, I think, in 2016, which isn't too far ago. And I think that the LGBTQIA plus or queer was kind of a thing around the time of its publication. So again, another just looking at that with scrutiny of why it's presented in the way it is. But that, yeah, that first chapter, he talks about David Bowie, his death, and like how artists saw him. Doesn't talk too much about his music, I don't think, or that was like not what I took away from it, what I remember. And also he talks about like other like really tumultuous relationships from people like Freddie Mercury and Dusty Springfield, and like just trigger warning on the abuse and things. There's also one bit in there, I think, about Joe Orton, who had an awful end with his jealous partner. And that's just, man, again, like, this book just, like, I get it, man. Like, people aren't perfect, but I kind of don't know that I like that. In a way, it kind of reinforces this correlation of, like, gay culture and, like, vice and, like, orgies and crime and drugs, and, like, not to say that, like, obviously that's going to be in that realm of some extent, but it's in so many other human realms too. I don't know that it should be talked about quite as much as I would talk about it if I were writing a book. I think maybe it would be like a footnote, frankly, more than like the meat of a lot of like the way that these people's lives went. I think it's valid to, acknowledge, for example, when people have had trouble with drugs because of the fame, because of the pressure, because of being closeted. I don't feel like it's necessarily being presented as such in this book. But again, I feel like I'm being like really critical, and it's just because like I guess I have a high standard for how we present queer media. I will say there was some really great the thing is like there is really great content in this. I just think it's like it's worth reading like with a little bit of a critical lens. And I like some of my favorite examples. I bookmarked two little bookmarks, and I bookmarked there's this album called Mad About the Boy that was like entirely anonymous artists contributing, and there was somebody that wrote it was to prove that good songs could and should be sung by everyone. Gender should not be the determining factor as to who should sing what. And I think that is a great thing to think about. And also I think there's a quote about Alice Cooper in here about like biologically everyone's male and female, what's the big deal, why is everybody so uptight about sex. Like I think that's pretty cool. I do think that this book is better read with Google nearby, because I just don't know that it is represented fully. I think it's important to listen to the music too. It has some really great chapters about like punk and politics, I think are really important. I do think like the electronic music influences are really crucial to see and acknowledge, and it is cool to see how that has worked. I just don't know that I like the way that the information has been presented in this book. This is like another, again, footnote, but he talks about Polari being like a new language, but it looks like actually it might have been borrowed from Romani folk, and I'm just like, again, it's like one of those like white guy things of just like, oh, look at this new thing we have, and it's like, can we acknowledge also like the influences of where that piece of gay culture came from? Because I think that is important. I think that there is an aspect of some white, queer, gay, LGBTQIA plus folk taking something from a different culture and kind of like appropriating it. I know that that's like kind of a topic that we need to kind of talk about and discuss, even in like drag, for example. There's a lot of things like even the Yas Queen, whether or not white people should be appropriating that, and how much that is a queer culture thing versus a piece of culture from Black folk or people of color or your BIPOC folk. I just think it's important to just take that into account. So anyways, but yeah, I think it was really cool reading a lot of these things. And also we mentioned some people that were like really anti-queer, like Anita Bryant and Eric Clapton. I think Anita Bryant actually is the reason why, this is my fun little tidbit for the day that is not in the book. I think that Anita Bryant's like partnered with Dole or some orange juice company, and at one point gay bars stopped stocking orange juice. So instead of screwdrivers and Harvey Wallbangers, which were big at the time of discos in the 70s and things, then a lot of gay bars actually would have apple juice instead. So vodka apple juice became a really popular thing in gay culture bars at that time because of this particular boycott. Just an interesting thing, I thought, and I like to always share that when I get a chance. Ooh, and I also wanted to mention something that I didn't see in the book that my wonderful partner told me about, this band called Black Flag that actually I think we're going to see next year. Very excited. And they have just been really like straightforward and very like punk rock, like standing up for that sort of thing. I think like they said that maybe one of the lead singers or somebody like punched a Nazi, like just, standing up for that sort of thing. So that's cool, and I think it's worth noting. One thing that I wish this book left us off with too was that support your local artists, support your local punk rock, your little bands. and support your local queer folk, because like it's hard out here, y'all. Like it does mention the Trump administration towards the end and kind of is like, yeah, but you know, for example, like we just went to a show with Bev Rage and the Drinks, which look them up. They're great. Drag queen front persons, kick ass. So like I think that that's important to consider that. And I, you know, this book is interesting. It is interesting to look at. It has some good pieces of information, but also like continue to be open to taking in new information and looking into other things. And Google is pretty incredible too. So that's kind of all I have to say to that. I do want to return this book. I don't know that it's overdue, but they did renew it for me, so I'm gonna get it back to them. So hopefully somebody else can, you know, take something from this. I think that's kind of all I have to say on this. I'm gonna feel really silly if I forgot anything. I think that, you know, like all things considered, like I'm glad I read it. It was a little bit of a slog at one point. But yeah, put in the comments if you have any questions or any interesting artists I should check out, any interesting shows or musicians that you're looking forward to seeing in the new year. I'm hoping to do some book reviews on 3 other books that are in their own ways overdue, but not library books. So I'm gonna just kind of make this into a little bit of a series till I figure out what I'm doing here. I have so many ideas. It's just like the execution that I think is getting me. And life has just been complex. So, you know how it goes. But you know, I'm glad to be doing this, and I hope you enjoyed it too. Oh, and if anybody was curious, my shirt is a very cool shirt. Yes, it has a rainbow on it, and it is the drop, and it's like the Grim Reaper doing a dead drop on like a lovely little rainbow road. So that's what that is. All right. Well, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.